Everyone pressed into the aisles, Roberto on Sergio's heels, Memo and Samuel close behind. The soldiers shouted at the stumbling crowd. They hit the boys' legs with wooden batons. Someone finally understood and yelled in Venetian dialect for everyone to go single file. Another boy jammed between Sergio and Roberto in the line. Roberto looked around in panic. At least Samuel was right behind Roberto, and Memo right behind him. When they got out of the theater, Roberto would catch up with Sergio. But when they got out of the theater, more soldiers were waiting for them. They shouted and pushed and split the boys into two groups, clearly by age. Sergio went with the older boys. Roberto called to him, but his voice was lost in the din. "Keep your mouth shut," hissed Memo. "Do what Sergio said." "Why?" said Roberto. "The Germans are on our side." "The Germans are on their own side," said Samuel. A boy near Roberto shouted, "I have to get home now." "Me too," shouted another. And everyone was shouting, "I have to get home now." Bang! The crowd hushed. Roberto looked around, frantic. But no one had fallen. A soldier must have fired into the air. The soldiers shouted and marched them down the street. Every Easter, Roberto went with his family to visit cousins who lived in the hills southwest of Padova. His cousin Guido herded a flock by himself. Roberto envied Guido and often imagined being him. But now he had the sensation of being one of the sheep, freshly shorn and wild-eyed, pressed on from all sides. His heart thumped. They went into the Mestre train station. Thank heavens, they were about to be sent home. Now he understood. This was their punishment for going to see an American film in the middle of the war. In a minute, the soldiers would separate out the ones who were going east to Venice from the ones who were going west to the villages outside Mestre. Roberto didn't even have the change for the train ticket, and he didn't want to borrow more money from Memo. But if he was lucky, no one would check to see if he had a ticket. And if he got caught, he'd explain what happened. It would all be okay. Roberto breathed more slowly. He looked around for the other groups of Venetian boys. They might as well all get together now. "Come on," he said to Memo and Samuel. He turned around and pressed toward the rear of the crowd. A soldier shouted at him, an Italian soldier. Things couldn't go too badly now that Italian soldiers were here too. Roberto moved toward the soldier in relief, but the soldier yelled and told Roberto to go with the crowd. Memo jerked hard on the back of Roberto's pants. Roberto turned forward and let himself be pushed by the crowd down the steps and up again onto the platform by the second track to a waiting train. The boys in his group were loaded into one train car. The older boys were loaded into a separate one. It made no sense. They didn't all live in the same direction. No one took seats. They stood at the windows in clumps and looked out at the soldiers on the train platforms. 2 German soldiers got on their train car. The engines revved up. The doors shut. The train started. It headed west. Roberto shook his head. "We're going the wrong way." His stomach lurched. "I should have run for it." Samuel stared at Roberto with terror in his eyes. "I should have run while I had a chance." Roberto shook his head again. He clenched his teeth against the fear. "This is a mistake. It's just a big mistake." The car full of boys was noisy and hot. "My mother's going to worry," someone said loudly. "I'll never get home on time." Voices of agreement chimed in. No one wanted to risk his mother's wrath or tears. People swapped mother stories. Roberto could imagine his own mother carrying on crazy-like, what with both him and Sergio showing up late. She imagined danger everywhere. "Look at them," said Samuel, with a small nod toward the soldiers at the end of the car. "They can't be more than 20 years old. You can tell in spite of their fancy uniforms." He blinked and whispered hoarsely, "2 of them to a whole carload of us." The 2 German soldiers sat on the last row of seats. They smoked. One of them yawned, showing clean white teeth.